I'll use the mic. Hello? Yeah, there you go, right. So I'm Lewis-Rowlands, the National Secretary of CND Cymru, that's Welsh CND. I'm speaking today about the developments in Wales and their connections, the intertwined civil and military nuclear industries, and why they are important to understand and to be able to place the wider British and international context in its correct place. So Wales has always been at the periphery of the historic empire, while also being at its heart. In some ways, it was a colony before colonialism. It was imperialized before imperialism. I'm not going to co-opt the language or theory of colonialism anymore, because that's a nuanced topic that requires much, much more time than I have here. But it is important to understand how that particular framework does colour our history and our current relationship with the other nations of these isles, particularly the one I'm in the heart of right now, that is the English and eventually the British metropole. So Wales's role as a feeder of the English and eventually British machine is long established. From farmland to fisheries, copper to coal, extraction has always been a reality to the Welsh experience. And so too has been the devastation that such extraction has left behind. It is in this context we have to understand the most recent developments in Wales regarding nuclear power and militarisation. Before I get to the nuclear power angle, some brief facts to understand the militarisation of Wales. 86% of Welsh airspace is classed as low-flying or ultra-low-flying zones for British, American and NATO forces to use. In some parts of Wales, particularly just northwest of where I live in Aberystwyth, jets will regularly fly only 600 feet off the ground in the infamous Mach Loop, a training run from RAF Valley down to Machynlleth, across to Aberystwyth, and then back up to RAF Valley. Wales hosts multiple training grounds for ground forces too. To name just one, Epynt, a community and farms, the last mostly Welsh-speaking ones in Brecknockshire, that was cleared nearly 90 years ago for the military to begin conducting live fire tests. Our seas aren't safe either. Over the summer, just before and just after tourists come, I'm not going to unpack that sentence, the waters and airspace of Bae Ceredigion are designated as a special area of conservation and protected special area of conservation, are closed in order to allow live fire and drone tests to be conducted out of Emydi Aberporth, tests that develop the technology used by genocidal regimes across the world, including Israel. It is with those facts that I ask you to listen to what I'm saying today. Wales will be, it is now confirmed, will be the staging ground for the unproven technology of SMNRs, so-called small modular nuclear reactors. To paraphrase Voltaire, are not small and are not really modular, or they are definitely nuclear reactors. It is the beautiful island of Ynys Môn, where I think Sarah's from, that is Anglesey, to give his incorrect name, by the way, that will host this fabulous new experimental technology. Built by Rolls-Royce, who have no experience in this area, funded by £2.5 billion of our taxes, and based on a whole lot of fantasies about cheap bills and good jobs, Wilfa Newydd will now host 3, though in the subtext maybe up to 8, SMNRs. For those lucky few of you who don't know the ins and outs of SMRs, they are essentially nuclear reactors concentrated into a smaller size, but that must be deployed in greater numbers in order to even approach being economical. They are the size they are for a few reasons, but I'm going to talk about 2 very notable ones today, fuel and containment. Their fuel is not the usual fuel, mined and enriched by heavily exploited workers in the global south, so roughly 5% enrichment. Instead, their fuel will likely be what's called HALEU fuel, that is high-assay, low-enriched uranium. That is usually enriched by those same heavily exploited global south workers, I cannot emphasize that enough, whose average lifespan, by the way, is roughly 35 years, to 15 to 20% level of enrichment. That's enriched enough to make a dirty bomb. That fuel is then placed inside a reactor and capped. But critically, it's not double contained or fitted with a capture core that will prevent leakage in the case of an accident. Higher enriched fuel, but lower standards. Not a recipe for safety, but certainly a recipe for profits. Rolls-Royce has said privately, deep in briefing documents, that they will not build until 15 have been ordered to ensure profitability, whilst saying at the same time that the new announcement by the government means that spades are going to be in the ground by 2026 and neutrons will be hitting atoms by 2030. With one hand they giveth, the other hand they taketh away. The estimated peak job numbers will be 3,000 during construction, a sorely needed boost to an island economy that is flagging, but they fail to mention that the majority of those jobs and those workers will be shipped in from other nuclear projects, they will do their work, and they will be moved on when they're no longer needed. because with one hand they giveth, the other hand they taketh away. They claim lower bills for an area of these islands that has the highest per watt cost of electricity anywhere, but fails to mention that further funding will likely probably have to come from an RAB, a regulated asset base of funding, basically a tax on the bills of local people, because with one hand they giveth, the other hand they taketh away. Now, I might sound flippant and sarcastic discussing some of this, but that's partially because I have to be. Wales is already a net energy exporter whose coasts and mountains, not under our control but that of the royal families, already play host to multitudes of wind turbines, river barrages, and fields of solar panels. So this is not to benefit those who, when we were in the EU, lived in one of the most deprived areas of the continent. Neither is it really to benefit the other people of these islands, a consolation prize we'd happily accept. Instead, this project will primarily serve those who have always benefited from the exploitation of Welsh resources, corporations and Whitehall. Corporations will benefit from massive influxes of public cash to feed their bottom line. They will benefit from the cultural and military-industrial clout that this will gain them, which they can then use to get the next lot of public money, and that they will then also be able to upskill the nuclear engineers. Other corporations will be able to take advantage of this as well, with the announced new AI growth zone alongside with the Holyhead Freeport, two areas with now reduced regulations and reduced taxes. The government gets the ability to ensure that Wales is reliant on Westminster for at least the next 50 years, if not longer, and a new place to train those who will eventually work on their nuclear submarines, their reactors and their missiles. Those same engineers, by the way, that Rolls-Royce will be upskilling. Because that dynamic is what is at the heart of this. The fluid barrier between military and civic nuclear projects. And that's why Rolls-Royce is familiar to us for another reason. They are the ones who develop and maintain the tech at the heart of our military nuclear capabilities. Now, before any of you begin accusing me of needing to wear a tinfoil hat for the last part of my contribution, the facts are clear. They're stated by the government and they're stated by Rolls-Royce themselves. They aren't even saying the quiet part out loud. They're saying the loud part out loud. In 2017, Rolls-Royce issued a dedicated report marshalling the case for a revolutionary technology at the time called small modular reactors to, and I quote, relieve the Ministry of Defence of the burden of developing and retaining nuclear skills and capability. The then head of the MOD, a former nuclear lobbyist, said, we are completing the build of the nuclear submarines which will carry conventional weaponry. We have at some point to renew the warheads, so there is very definitely an opportunity here for the nation to grasp in terms of building up its nuclear skills. I do not think that is going to happen by accident. It's going to require concerted government action to make it happen. Concerted government action. Like, say, billions of pounds pumped into nuclear projects to keep them going. Before I spiral into the need to pull out some red strings and pictures of a pinboard, I will quickly move to another nuclear fantasy occurring in Wales before then summing up. Last Energy, a US nuclear venture capital firm, a phrase that keeps me awake at night, currently owns a site in South Wales, the old Llynfi coal power plant, that they are in the middle of trying to convert into a new SNMR site. The difference is, with this site, is that they claim, at least, is going to be entirely privately funded. They propose that this is a site that would essentially treat these reactors as, in their phrase, nuclear batteries. They will be installed in a site, and for 6 years, they will then, after 6 years, be, again using their word, unplugged and replaced. That spent reactor will then be stored underground on the site until the end of life of the site, which is roughly 4 years, if not longer. That would mean, if they are successfully getting this project going, that some reactors, untested and experimental, would be buried for 44 years, while some reactors would still recently have been spent before moving away. How on earth can they say that the first lot of reactors would need 44 years before being ready for transport and disposal, while the newest lot will be ready only 8 years after they are spent? Last Energy has spent months lobbying the government, the two governments, not to make them go through the normal regulation and approval process, claiming that it would threaten economic project viability. If even the lackluster approval process, if even the lackluster regulation and approval process the government proposes is too stringent for them, that says a hell of a lot regarding the potential risks for the site and the surrounding area, with nearly 1 million people within a 40-mile radius. Oh, and by the way, those SMRs are slated to be built in the London gateway port, so local CND groups, get your campaigning hats on. Neither Wales nor Britain needs nuclear. An island with a fifth of the tidal, wind and solar generating capacity of Europe does not need nuclear. We must oppose these plans and whatever scheme they concoct next. If you're about workers' rights, if you care about energy independence, if you care about climate crisis, if you care about environmental safety and biodiversity, if you care about nuclear weapons and their disarmament, if you're an internationalist, a socialist, or just someone who wants to leave a better world for the next generation, you would oppose nuclear power and you would oppose nuclear weapons. And you would join us in campaigning against these terrible plans. Diolch am wrando, solidariaeth, solidarity, and thank you for listening.